Let me ask you something. Think about the last time you were really, genuinely excited about something. Maybe it was a job interview before the job that you've always wanted, your dream job. Maybe it was the morning before a first date, or maybe it's standing in the hallway before a big performance and your heart is racing because you are so excited. Now, think about the last time you were stressed. Really stressed. Like a deadline you couldn't see. A conversation that you were absolutely dreading having. Or this low hum of just worry that follows you to bed and is still there when you wake up. Here's something wild. Your body in all those situations felt almost identical. Elevated heart rate, cortisol and adrenaline flooding your bloodstream, heightened senses, sharpened focus, and your muscles and your whole body is just primed and ready to go. So, physiologically speaking, your body cannot tell the difference between the stress of excitement and the stress of dread. That's not a metaphor. That's biology. And once you understand that, when you really sit with it, it changes the way you understand yourself. So there's a name for each type of stress. The first is called eustress. This is the positive stress. It's spelled EU stress, in case you're wondering. It's pronounced eustress. It comes from the Greek word for good. And it's the stress that propels you. It's positive stress. And that's what shows up when you're chasing something that matters to you. A big goal, a challenge, a big dream. It's the stress of an athlete in the locker room before a championship game, an entrepreneur pitching a company for the first time, a parent teaching their kid to ride a bike. That's all positive stress. It's motivating. It sharpens your thinking, and it says, this matters, pay attention, be present. Now, the second type of stress is called distress, and I think most people know what distress is by heart. It's stress without a clear path through. It's usually pretty overwhelming, and it feels like it won't resolve in any way. There's this kind of going around in circles where it feels like it's never going to end. It feels like there's just all this pressure on top of you that you can't quite get rid of, and it sometimes gets hard to breathe. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but this is what happens when the threat feels bigger than your ability to handle it, and you have no idea when it stops. One energizes, one erodes. That's how these two types of stress work. And the thing that makes this complicated and worth understanding is the same situation can be eustress for one person, positive for one person, and distress, bad, for another. The difference isn't always the event. Sometimes it's the story you're telling yourself about the event. There's something I heard recently that resonated with me related to this, and it's, the delta between what actually happened and how we perceive what happened is where our suffering is. So I don't know how to really frame that in a better way, but basically all the suffering we have and all the stress that we have comes from the delta between what actually happened and how we perceive it. So how we perceive things sometimes has a huge, huge impact on the stress we experience from that event. And I'll tell a story just as an analogy. So I'll tell you about this guy. His name's Marco. And Marco was a project manager at a company that was growing really fast. And when companies grow fast, they need some people that just kind of take the wheel and hold things together. And Marco was one of those people. And for a while for Marco, he loved what he did. It felt like positive eustress. He was busy, and the busyness had a form to it, right? He knew what he was doing. He could see the problems. He could solve the problems, and the work was meaningful and had very clear direction to Marco. Then things shifted all of a sudden. The team grew, but the support didn't. Expectations expanded, and Marco had more work, but the hours of work didn't. He was getting emails at 10 o'clock at night and responding at 11 o'clock at night. Marco was waking up at 3 a.m., not because his alarm went off, but because his mind did, and he was going over lists, remembering things he had to do for work, replaying conversations in his head, and he was rehearsing problems for tomorrow before today was even done. Now, Marco told himself that this was temporary, that things would ease up maybe after this month when the project he was working on shipped out to the customer. It would be okay, and he'd be able to take a breath and exhale. But then the next month came, and the next project came, and then the next one after that, and after that. And his body was running this marathon every single day, and it never crossed the finish line. And that started to catch up with him. He starts getting headaches that he couldn't explain. His patience, which had always been one of his best gifts, started wearing thin in every situation. At the dinner table, in the middle of bedtime stories, in quiet moments with his partner that used to feel like rest, it just felt like another place that he was falling behind. One afternoon, his 7-year-old daughter comes to show him a drawing that she'd made. She's extremely proud of it. You could see it in her eyes, the way she held it. She's holding it like she's got the Mona Lisa in her hands. And Marco just looks up from his laptop, takes it in for about 2 or 3 seconds and says, "That's nice," and just goes back to reading emails. And his daughter walks away quietly. And Marco noticed that, and he didn't do anything about it. He just went back to reading his emails because the email was urgent and he had the deadline, and he just said he would make it up to her later. But later, he sat at the kitchen table by himself after she was already in bed, and Marco realized something. Not for the first time, but maybe for the first time in a way that he couldn't ignore, that the job and the stress was stealing his presence. He was in the room, but he wasn't there. And his body had been trying to tell him that for months. The headaches, the insomnia, the irritability, and the exhaustion that sleep didn't fix. These weren't random inconveniences. They're signals. They were signals that his nervous system was saying, hey, we can't sustain this and something has to change. So what's happening inside Marco's body, and if you relate to this, then maybe happening inside yours too, is that when you encounter stress, any stress, your hypothalamus, a small but mighty region in your brain, fires off this alarm. And your adrenaline surges, your heart rate climbs, your muscles tighten, your senses sharpen, and blood is redirected away from things like digestion towards your limbs. And this is your fight or flight response. It is ancient, it is brilliant, it was designed to help your ancestors sprint away from predators like tigers, lions, and bears, oh my, and survive immediate short-term threats. The key word is short-term. Because when the stress is brief, you outrun that threat, you land the interview, you nail the presentation, and your body resets. The cortisol drops, your heart rate slows down, you take a breath and exhale, and you go back to your baseline. But when the stress is chronic, when it doesn't resolve, and there's no finish line, and when the alarm stays on, your body stays in that state of high alert. And living in high alert is very expensive. When you're constantly in this high stress state, it has been shown to impair your memory and concentration. It weakens your immune system. It's going to increase inflammation in your body. And over time, it even elevates your risk for cardiovascular disease, anxiety, depression, and a long, long list of things that you do not want on your radar. And you may think, oh, great, my body's just trying to punish me for doing my job. Awesome. But your body's not trying to punish you. This is your body protecting you, but it needs your help. You need to listen because your body can't distinguish between the stress of a genuine emergency and the stress of an overflowing Outlook inbox or Gmail. You know, I don't judge. But either way, your body's going to respond the same way to the genuine stress or the email stress. And it can only sustain that response for so long before it starts sending you urgent memos. And those memos are the headaches, the sleepless nights, a short fuse, and that heaviness we talked about. Those aren't character flaws, and those aren't, necessarily problems that you've always had. That's your body trying to tell you, hey, stop. Okay, so we talked through the stress, and now we need a solution. So what do? First, you learn to listen to yourself. And before you can manage stress, you have to be willing to hear it. Not dismiss the stress, not power through it, just acknowledge that it's there. When your body starts sending signals, the fatigue, the tension, the irritability, the inability to be fully present in a room that you're physically standing in, take that seriously. Not as a sign that you're weak, as a sign that you're human, and something in your current reality needs attention. So, step 1 is name what you're feeling. There's been research done at UCLA that found that the act of just naming an emotion, labeling it reduces the intensity of the stress response in your brain. Not, I'm stressed, but maybe looking at it as, I'm overwhelmed because I have too many competing priorities. I'm anxious because this outcome is uncertain and this outcome matters to me. I'm afraid that I'm not enough. Those are the things that we look to name. Not just I'm stressed, but what are those problems underlying the stress? Naming these things loosens the grip. It moves the experience from the reactive part of your brain to the reasoning part. It gives distance between you and the stress, and the distance gives you choices. Now, this is similar to what I mentioned earlier about the delta between, what happens and what you perceive as the suffering. So I want to mention this is reframe whatever you can whenever you can. And remember that the same physiological state underlies both eustress, the good stress, and distress, the bad stress. And the difference typically is the story we tell ourselves. So there's been studies done where people were put into a situation and basically given different information about the same situation, right? And some people were then put under distress, and other people were put under eustress, good stress, and found that the people that were under eustress in the same situation had healthier cardiovascular profiles than those who were under the bad stress. So all that shifted here was their perception, not the situation. It was the exact same situation, but the way that they saw the situation completely changed how they reacted to it. So it's very, very important that we are able to frame a situation however we can to make sure we perceive it in a way that is as positive as possible. So when you feel that surge of stress coming before something hard, ask yourself, is this actually dangerous, or is it just my body getting ready? Is this distress? Is it going to be a bad situation, or am I on the edge of something great? Is there something positive I'm going to get out of this? Sometimes you'll find that, you can get something positive out of the situation, even if it's a bad situation. And that reframe can be the difference between being consumed by the feeling of stress and being carried by the good stress. All right, step 3, build recovery into the structure. So one of the most costly lies that we tell ourselves is that rest is a reward you earn after the work is done. But the truth is, recovery is not the opposite of performance. Recovery is part of the performance process. Elite athletes don't treat rest as optional. They treat it as part of their training. They know that the adaptation, getting stronger, faster, sharper, it doesn't happen during the work. It happens during the recovery. And your mind works the exact same way. Sleep is not lost time. It is when your brain consolidates learning, regulates emotions, and quite literally clears the metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. Your brain literally, you look this up, I won't get into this whole thing. Your brain literally does this thing where it washes itself if you're getting enough sleep at night. And if you don't get enough sleep, then your brain won't do the whole washing thing. It won't take its little bubble bath. So a full night of sleep is one of the most productive things you can do for your performance and your well-being. There's also this thing called micro recoveries, and those matter too. 5 minutes away from a screen, a walk around the block, a meal that you sit down to eat without looking at your phone and watching TikToks or watching me talk on YouTube, whatever it is. These aren't luxuries. These are maintenance. These are very important things to do. So next one, and most people don't like this one, is move your body. Get up and move. Physical movement is one of the most consistently supported interventions for stress and anxiety that exists. Exercise metabolizes excess cortisol. It releases endorphins, which supports cognitive function, emotional resilience. This signals to your nervous system that the threat has passed, that you are capable, that you are alive and well in your body. You do not need to train for a marathon. A 20-minute walk has measurable effects. Movement is not punishment. It is one of the kindest things you can offer yourself. And I'll just reiterate this one more time. You need to move. It is so important. It is one of the best ways to alleviate any anxiety you're having. So even if it's taking a 10-minute walk during lunch or something like that, after you eat, whatever, go for a walk, get up, move around. It doesn't have to be anything special, all right? Just do it. All right, I got 2 more. Next one is connect with people as much as possible. One of the most underrated stress regulators is also one of the most ancient, and that is just human connection. We are social tribal beings. There's something called co-regulation, and our nervous system pretty much calms down when we're around other people and feel safe with them. And that's real and that's powerful. A conversation with someone that you trust, a hug that lasts more than 3 seconds, and not one of those lazy one-armed hugs, and maybe a meal shared without phones on the table. Isolation amplifies distress. Connection helps resolve that stress. And the last one that no one ever seems to do for some reason is ask for help when the weight's too heavy. If there's permanent distress and it feels like it's settled in and it's stopped responding to things that usually help, please talk to someone, a therapist, a counselor, a doctor, a friend. There is no version of strength that requires you to carry what you were never meant to carry alone. Asking for help is one of the best things you can do for yourself, I promise. So to jump back to our friend Marco, what did Marco learn? Marco didn't overhaul his life overnight. He started with small things, like logging off at a set time at work, not because he was done, because work never really ends, I guess, but because he decided that the evening belonged to him and to the people that he loved, and that boundary was worth protecting. He started going for walks in the morning before he opened his email. Not long ones, just enough to remind his body that it exists outside of a chair. He started slowly realizing the difference between urgency and importance, and the things that he felt were urgent before, he realized were not important. So he started focusing on the things that really were genuinely important, like the drawings his daughter made, the conversations with his partner, or just the moments of quiet to himself. And Marco still gets stressed. Of course he does. He's a human being navigating a very complicated, stressful world, but he's learned to hear his body differently. He learned to ask, when the familiar tension arrives, what is it trying to tell me? And sometimes the answer is, this is important, lean in. And sometimes the answer is, something needs to change. Both are valuable and both are worth listening to. So, to wrap up, your body is not your enemy. It is not dramatic. It is not weak. It is not broken when it hurts or tired when it struggles to keep the pace you've set for it. Your body is the most honest friend you'll ever have, to be honest. It will not lie to you. It will not pretend everything is fine when it isn't. It will not stay quiet just because quiet is inconvenient. It will find a way to tell you the truth, one way or another. And the question is whether you're willing to listen. Your stress, all of it, the good and the bad, is information. It is a signal in a world full of noise. And you have the capacity to learn to read that, to work with it, to let it tell you what matters and what doesn't matter, when to push, when to pause, when to say yes, and when to say no, not right now, I need something different. You are not a machine, and you are not expected to run like a machine. You're a person that needs rest, needs connection, needs to move, and needs to, enjoy moments with other people. And that's the beauty of being alive. You need to be present. You need to take care of yourself. That needs to not be an afterthought. It is not a reward for a hard week. It is a daily, non-negotiable aspect for the one body and the one life you have been given. Your body has probably been trying to tell you something, and it's time to listen.